Does everybody in Maryland talk funny? Does Maryland wish they weren't part of the South? And do Marylanders put Old Bay on everything? We'll answer those questions and more. So put on a suit or grab your camo. We're going to unbox the state of Maryland. Okay, so here we are in one of the most well-known true hoods in our country, Baltimore. Such a sad, sad place Baltimore has become. This used to be such a great place to live, but now, well, it is not. But Maryland is a lot more than just Baltimore, everyone. It's actually a state with a lot of various regions and cultures. Politically, socially, and economically, this state is actually pretty diverse for such a small place. It's not a big state. If you measure Maryland's size, there's only 7 states that are smaller. Maryland's barely bigger than Vermont. But population-wise, Maryland ranks 19th. Maryland has more people than Colorado does. But to really understand what it's like in Maryland, you have to look at a map to get a big picture overview. Like this. Here is Maryland. Let's begin our journey on the western side of the state. This is the Maryland Panhandle, called, well, Western Maryland. This part of the state's made up of 3 counties, Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington. There's only about 250,000 people here, or about 4% of the state's entire population. This would include the cities of Cumberland, Frostburg, and Hagerstown, all the way to pretty much Frederick. Culturally, Western Maryland is West by God, Virginia, meaning folks way out here in the sticks have more in common with West Virginia than they do Maryland. Crime here is really high. Many people here use drugs and are now out of work since factories shut down and moved away. It's a pretty poor place with a lot of Republican voters. They really don't see eye to eye with the rest of the state. Actually, people out here don't really want to be part of the rest of the state. Way back in 2014, locals started up a whole new thing they called the Western Maryland Initiative, or Free Western Maryland. They have a Facebook page with 9,200 people, which is a lot, but kinda not a lot. That's probably because most people in this part of the state don't have internet. Many people don't have phones. Anyways, they don't like tax increases, gun control, or the fact that the rest of the state of Maryland outvotes them. Many of the communities out here in central Appalachia are very small. This is where people hike and explore national parks. There's also Wisp Ski Resort, Maryland's only ski resort. Cumberland's a neat place. It's really pretty with lots of old architecture. Also of note is a real historical part of Maryland. Places like Antietam and just across the river at Harper's Ferry in West Virginia were home to some of the bloodiest battles in Civil War history. The only real liberal place out here are the rich homes along Deep Creek Lake, filled with wealthy people who buy up second homes or flee from central Maryland once they retire. They aren't liked much because they try to push their ideologies into Western Maryland. We're going to see a lot of that in this state. It's sweaty in here, I'll tell you. Up here, along the Pennsylvania state line, are farms and small towns. It's quiet here. Folks kind of keep to themselves and stay out of trouble for the most part. Sometimes you'll be driving along I-95 up in this part of northern Maryland, and you have to take a pee. So you stop somewhere and get out and gawk at how in the world do these people live like this? I can't believe it. Down here along the Chesapeake is the Aberdeen Proving Ground, which is a U.S. Army facility. They blow stuff up here sometimes. Speaking of the Chesapeake, we should briefly discuss it. This is a bay separated from the Atlantic Ocean by this strip of land called the Delmarva Peninsula. They catch a lot of crabs here. The Chesapeake separates mainland Maryland from what is referred to as the Eastern Shore. The Eastern Shore is a whole region on its own. There's hunters here and rednecks and more hunters and more rednecks, an occasional crab farm or some swamps. This is conservative with a capital C. These are ruby red folks way out here, folks. If Western Maryland is West Virginia, then a lot of the Eastern Shore is the South. At least a lot of it is. Sort of right around here is where the South begins in Maryland. This is home to a lot of former tobacco farms, and it's very rural down here. There's a lot of blue-collar folks. A lot of people here work for one of many Purdue chicken farms in the area, or at Salisbury University in Salisbury. Over here in Worcester County along the Atlantic is Ocean City. Now, this place was a dump 20 years ago, but they've really cleaned the place up. This was once a smallish summer town, but now it's pretty lively for about 10 months a year. Locals here are sick of the crowds, though, and practically everybody from Maryland flocks here across the rural landscape to come and gamble and frolic. It's pretty clean in Ocean City and sort of safe. Of course, Ocean City is not as nice as nearby Delaware beaches of Rehoboth and Bethany Beach, but for Maryland, it'll do. Also worth mentioning is that a lot of people in Maryland drive across the Delaware border to get cheap booze and furniture. And a lot of people come to the Eastern Shore from regular Maryland to spend the day catching crabs with chicken necks. That's why they're called chicken neckers. But not all parts of the Eastern Shore are backwards rednecks. People who want to flee the Montgomery County and Metro DC area live on the western side of the Eastern Shore in places like Queen Anne's County. This whole area by Easton and St. Michael's are also filled with wealthier people who fled Metro DC. Now, these Eastern Shore newbies aren't liked by Eastern Shore locals who feel they bring their liberal elite politics over the bridge. They are called carpetbaggers. So you have chicken neckers and carpetbaggers. As you cross the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, you get into where the wealth and political power of Maryland's located. Annapolis is a really wealthy place along Chesapeake. This is home to the U.S. Naval Academy. Another area worth noting is Gibson Island, here along the western shore. This is basically a giant gated community that you will never see inside of, unless you're friends with or know a really wealthy politician. If you do, you might get invited once until you ruin it and are never allowed back into Gibson Island again. This part of the state here is where they take the pictures to make all of Maryland look like this part of the state. It is not. The lower part of the western shore is not really worth talking about much. It's rural and looks like the South. You could move there, but you'd likely be bored. But with the turmoil and unrest going on in America, boring might not be such a bad thing. As we get closer to Prince George's County, we're now on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., where things get really interesting. Some call this PG County, and others hate it when you call it PG County. This is referred to as Ward 9 of the district. PG County is terrible in some parts, not too bad in other parts. As Washington, D.C. is being gentrified, more and more poor people are relocating here or in Baltimore proper. College Park is here, just outside of Montgomery County. College Park is where the University of Maryland is. This place used to be pretty lame, but it's emerged as a great college town, and the University of Maryland is now very hard to get into if you're from out of state. Good for them at the University of Maryland. And then we have Montgomery County, home of the snobs. The entire rest of the state hates Montgomery County. They control a big part of the electorate and spending power, and people here want the rest of the state to be just like Montgomery County. Wealthy suburbs, liberal, safe, and totally out of touch with the rest of the region. It's made up of Bethesda, Chevy Chase, Silver Spring, and the less fancy suburbs further away from DC proper. Montgomery Countyers drive BMWs and Audis and Jaguars, and they country club. Taxes are high here, which is why a lot of Marylanders eventually move away from Montgomery County when they get older to retire to a place that's more affordable or to just buy a second home somewhere. Nearby is Baltimore County, not to be confused with Baltimore proper. You could actually break Baltimore County up into various regions too. Eastern Baltimore County near Dundalk used to be blue collar, but factories left, so they had to find other work, likely for the government. Up here is farm country mostly. Central Baltimore County is also blue-collar-ish, but factories also left here, so they are also middle-class folks who have government jobs now. Western Baltimore County is mostly Republicans and country club elites who wish they could afford to live in Montgomery County, but they cannot. Too bad for them. In a lot of areas of Baltimore County, the yuppies have moved in to get a break on taxes and to flee the large sprawl that is Metro DC. This is the Natty Bo's, Utz Potato Chips, Old Bay crowd. Actually, that's most of Maryland. National beer, we'll sing you the story of national beer. And while I'm singing, I'd like to say it's brewed on the shores of the Chesapeake Bay.
My, that sounds like the old troubadour.
Hi, Troop. Who your friend with the doily on his neck?
This is Lord Baltimore, first governor of Maryland.
Some Marylanders actually begin their day by chugging a few Natty Bo's and snorting Old Bay. Old Bay, in case you didn't know, is a seasoning that was invented in Baltimore. It's made of celery salt, black pepper, crushed red pepper flakes, and paprika, and other natural and unnatural ingredients. It's not too bad. People in Maryland put it on everything, even on cookies. They add Old Bay to their Old Bay. They especially love to put it on crabs. which are a huge deal in Maryland. Half of the blue crabs caught in the U.S. are caught in Maryland waters. Good for you, crab fishermen in Maryland. Speaking of crabs, let's talk about Baltimore. Not only is this a place of disease and destitute dives, Baltimore is where dreams go to die, or where dreams were never even dreamed to begin with. The city of Baltimore has about 10% of the state's entire population. Sure, downtown Baltimore is pretty nice, it's kind of quiet at night, but north of downtown in this general area is as bad as you've heard. Actually, it's even worse than you've heard. Up until the mid-90s, this place wasn't so bad, but then when Governor Martin O'Malley took over, things started to get bad. Baltimore's crime levels are always in the top 10 of the nation. A large amount of the population here never finished high school, and many are on welfare, and that's just so sad for them. Now, the politicians here have been reluctant to gentrify Baltimore and bring in new growth and business because, well, then the locals would have to move away, and that would mean the liberal mayors would lose their support. At least that's the word on the street. Of course, we have to talk about Maryland stereotypes. One of them is Maryland people kind of talk funny. It's not a southern accent, but it's not a hard northeast accent either. They call it Washington, D.C., or Baltimore. They don't go to the beach, they go to the water. Maryland's state sport is jousting, but it should be lacrosse. Not only do the rednecks out in the sticks play lacrosse, the kids in Montgomery County play it too. They call them the Lax Bros here. For sports, most people are into the University of Maryland, of course. For baseball, there's a lot of Orioles fans. And football's mixed. There's some Redskins fans and Eagles fans and even Steelers fans in some parts. But most people in Maryland would die for Ravens tickets. Or, if they can't afford them, they love the Ravens so much they'll climb over the fences to get into games. Yes, this is a thing. Or was a thing, at least once. Maybe more than that, but this was one time it was actually recorded.
Did you know the Colts used to be in Baltimore?
I did know that, Mappy. I knew they also won 4 NFL titles when they were in Baltimore. JK, I didn't know that. I had to look it up. Hey, I didn't know you were a Redskins fan.
I liked watching Joe Theismann play.
You did not, Mappy. You weren't even born when Joe Theismann played. Get out of here with that. Okay, so that's pretty much the state of Maryland. Now, if you go there or move there, you'll have a better idea on what it's like here. Now, we could have talked about why Maryland's mascot's a turtle, or why everybody here says hun all the time, or why their state flag's a big mess. But we have to go. I'm driving through Baltimore right now, and I think those were gunshots. Or fireworks. Or both. Here in Maryland, such a pretty state. There is a bay here and lots of rednecks. Rich people live here and they are so snobby. Many of them have big boats and they are rude. Baltimore, it's scary, 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 it's scary. You might get shot. You might get shot. Baltimore is scary, it's 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 scary. It might not stop. It might not stop. They all love Old Bay. They're in love with Old Bay. They all eat Old Bay on all their crab cakes. They all eat Old Bay every day. Old Bay for presents on their birthday. Some natty bows and some Old Bay. What could be better? Maybe some pepper. A bunch of crab legs and Old Bay. That is their entree. And maybe more crabs. Hun? Special thanks to my new friend Dwight Patel, a Maryland native who knows this state more than any other person I've met knows their state. A lot of this came straight from his own personal insights. Thanks, Dwight. Hey guys, if you learned something new or you just like this video, make sure to like it. And if you really like this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get all of our videos about what it's like to live in different places in America.